People, obviously Russ just jumped on here. So I think in order to keep with our time and some of these individuals that do have things going on after this, we probably should go ahead and get started. But I just welcome everybody. Thank you for taking the time to attend. There are a couple of individuals we did hear from that I anticipate might be joining as we meet today. So we welcome Perry Hammock, and Perry has just been a wonderful supporter of the foundation, the agency, for many years. His family has utilized our services as well, and we're very thankful for that. But Perry has continued to help us out from a consultative role to the foundation and the agency as we work more closely with our donors. And he just has quite a variety of experiences with his prior, I guess in his prior jobs. And so we always value what he can share with us each day from his past experiences. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to Perry. And if you have questions, you can go ahead and enter them in the chat, or I know some people are muted because they either don't have the capability to speak, or they're trying to keep things quiet on their end. So, but just go ahead and ask some questions if you have any as we go along the way. So Perry, go ahead, and thank you again.
Yay. Hey, thanks for having me. Let's make sure the technology works here.
Yeah.
All right.
Is
it working?
Yep, it's working. You can.
Okay, there. Is that better?
There. Yep, that's much better. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Well, this is kind of hi everybody, and gosh, hi Mr. and Mrs. Roberts. It's been a long time. It's kind of good to talk to people from the old stomping grounds, so that's fun too. I work most all of my major working life in philanthropy. I worked at Ivy Tech for 33 years and was head of the foundation there for a long time. And after I left there and had the wonderful blessing to be head of the Indiana Bicentennial, which was a great time. We had some Boone County representation. Jane was the county coordinator and did a great job. And Renee Stanley was my deputy director and still working at the state. And that was great fun. And so I thought I would retire. I failed retirement pretty badly. And so I still do a little work with fundraising with colleges. I've worked with BC, SSI, and also I'm working right now with the regional council on aging down in Evansville. So, but I greet you from sunny Albuquerque. I'm here visiting our grandkids and kids, and we're enjoying the time to be away and also the time to still do some things. So to me, one of the things that I worry about is people who don't have their planning done. And I learned this in my philanthropic career, that a lot of people just put things off. And so I've developed kind of 3 seminars that I do for folks just to kind of talk about making sure that we have our things in order, because I know my mom did, and that was a blessing for Jane and myself when that time came. So I just kind of want to share this a little bit. And as you all know, the best is yet to come. Frank was right, wasn't he? I'm not going to read these slides to you. There are some web links and all those, and Sonia will have all those. So don't worry about if I miss how to get a hold of the government or whatever. You'll be able to get those things. And so I want to mostly tell you stories, because I know you all can read. And if you can't read, raise your hand and cite your West Virginia lineage, and I'll read things to you. But this one I will read. I want you to know up front, I am not an attorney. I'm not a banker. I'm not your CPA. I'm not going to give you anything that should be construed as legal advice, as financial advice. I want to present some things to you that you should be thinking about, and maybe you already have. And if so, then that's wonderful. But how and when you operate on those things, that's up to you, right? So that's the ground rules. Why is planning important? I think everybody knows the term carpe diem, seize the day, but that's not really the term. It's carpe diem et memento mori, which means seize the day because remember you are mortal, remember you will die. And it wasn't said in a bad way, it was said in a way of celebration. And even back then, the Romans believed that if you had everything in order, then you could live every day like it was your last and not have regrets at the end. So this is my grandson Owen hiking in the mountains with his dad. And I don't know if you can see, but preparing for the inevitable, Dad is hiking with his potty chair because we were out when they were potty training Owen, and we knew what the inevitable was going to be. And also we had extra things to account for the unthinkable. But that's kind of what I want people to think about. A lot of people think, well, I don't have $1 million. I don't need an estate plan. And I'll use Aretha Franklin. If you've followed any of this story, the Queen of Soul died in 2018. She has an estate that now they think is worth over $100 million. She has 4 adult grown children, one of whom has lived most of their adult life in a home because they're not able to take care of themselves. She died without a will, although she was considered one of the shrewdest businesswomen in Motown, died without a will. The kids have been fighting over it since 2018. It's still not solved. It's still not resolved. It's gone underground now. I can't get any updates on it. But it's estimated that her estate really now is more than $100 million, and they've spent at least $20 million in attorney's fees because the kids are all fighting over who's driving her Mercedes, who's doing this. And for a while, the poor child who was institutionalized, they couldn't pay his bills because they had to get a judge to order them to release enough money for his care. So the reason you need an estate plan is to not be a fool and to make sure that you take care of the ones you love, right? It's not really about us because we'll be dead. So when you die, you're dead, and other things will happen to you and your immortality, that's great. But as far as doing anything with your money, time has passed. So half of Americans die without a will. And that includes, if we have any on the line, that, depending on which survey you see, that includes attorneys. So there's something in the American culture that we don't wish to think about our own mortality. We don't want to do that. We want to believe that we're the generation who thought we would live forever, except for James Dean. But having a plan is not just about your money. It's a way of clarifying for your kids and for those that you love what your values are, how you want to dispose of your assets. The state will take care of it. The federal government and the state of Indiana will dispose of your assets, I promise you. Now, it may or may not be the way you choose to do it. If you don't care, well then, okay, that's fine. But if you do care, then let's take a little bit of time and talk about how we can do that. I think the real reason people don't do it is because they don't want to think about the contingencies. What if I don't go first? What if something happens to one of the kids? What if, and those things make us sad. So we don't want to think about it. So we just don't get around to doing it. And that's not the way, I don't think that's the way to work. So, and I think leaving your legacy is important because the estate plan gives you a way to continue those things that you thought were important in the community during your lifetime. Where you volunteered, where you supported, whether it's BCSSI, whether it's the church, all these things I think are possible in your will. Best reasons are these reasons. It's mom and kids and grandkids and spouses, and that's what I want to talk about today. Having an estate plan can be simple or very complex. It depends on where you are in life. Are you young? I think everybody who has something should have at least a simple will. Because how do we know when the time comes that you really valued those little funny toys that you've played with forever and that they're worth $10,000? They end up at Goodwill. And I go on Wednesdays when it's senior day and I buy those things, just so you'll know. And I sell them on Facebook Marketplace. So that's how I make money. But you see things and you see there's a lot of sadness. I think there's sadness in Goodwill and Salvation Army because people probably would have relished those things, but they end up going out when the cleaners come in to clean out the house, right? Or the next people take over the house fully furnished and everything's at the curbside, which I also collect curbside stuff. So your assets, your obligations, what you want to do, that's all important things to think about. And as things change, now this is a funny slide because if you'll notice on your screen left, that's Perry with his daughter, Emily. Screen right, about the same time of birth, that's me holding my grandson, Owen. Now, the funny thing is, and this ties into what we're talking about, babies look about the same, but going from dad to Tipper, I've taken a change. I never had that much forehead before, amongst other things. So as things change, so should your plans. We were blessed in October to welcome little Willa to the world. So if I leave my estate plan the way it was and don't make some simple changes accounting for Willa, if I've set it up in such a way, if the language is written in a certain way, Willa wouldn't be eligible to have a college scholarship fund from Tipper and Cece. Well, that's not what we want to do. So we have to look at it every so often. I recommend you look at your estate plan every year and that you revise it and go through it every 5 years. Plus, as we get older, it's a chance to see somebody other than somebody in healthcare. So why not do it every so often and get a chance to visit with an accountant or attorney and pay a few bucks? So as things go on and life has gotten so complicated for people, there, I'm sure I do, grandparents who are caring for grandchildren because the kids aren't quite able to, and that should change your estate plan. Or if you have children who maybe aren't as capable with money as others, you can set them up in a trust or one thing or the other. That's our responsibility for having the assets. And I can tell you stories of kids who turned 18, their parents had, one whose parents had passed, and suddenly they had $100,000 because that's the way it worked. They were of age, they got $100,000, and within 8 months they were in jail. So money doesn't always solve, sometimes it causes. And survivorship is something I think we should think about a lot. So here's what I want to talk about real briefly today. Some quick tools, and Sonia will keep me on track. I got my watch here. I'll try to do that because I can talk about this stuff forever because I think it's important. So cut me off. I want to talk a little bit about some financial tools, about some decision-making tools, and about some healthcare tools. Now, my wife, this is Cece on the left. When we were in Africa, her estate plan consisted of the old adage of, I don't have to outrun the elephant, I just have to outrun you. And you can see she has her hand firmly planted in my solar plexus, and she's going to push me back towards the elephant, who did actually charge us, and take off like a bat. So I don't consider that to be a good estate plan. I don't think it was fair. I don't think it was egalitarian, but now I do know what her values are. So let's talk about some things real quickly, and stop me anytime, ask questions anytime as we go through it. You probably all have a will. If you don't, shame on you, you're part of that 50%, and you saw the head and the horse earlier. Let's get a will done. It's the basis of what you do. It's something that your kids should have. It's something that your friends should have. It's something you should talk about. As soon as you finish talking about masks, you should talk about, do you have a will? If not, and if you don't wear a mask, you should have a will, especially. But this allows you to name people who will represent you when you're gone, to allow someone to pay your taxes, your settlement costs. You probably know this, but the funny thing is, for most Americans, the year that you're the richest, according to the government, will be the year after you die. Because many of us have a 403B, a 401k, an IRA, pre-tax money. When you die, guess what? All that money becomes taxable. And there's no way, well, there's one way. There's very little way to avoid paying taxation on the pre-tax money that you have. Matter of fact, I'm of the age now where I just met with my financial planner, and he's talking about I should take money out that I don't need and pay taxes on it. They call it bracket filling to avoid having to pay higher taxes down the road. And I'm like, this is too much for me. Let me think about it. But it is possible that the richest you will ever be is when you're dead. Okay, that's how it works. Death and taxes are unavoidable. But their will lets you perhaps make some changes to that and avoid some of that taxation. And how you dispose of your assets, what the things that are in your estate. If you need an administrator, which may be different than your personal representative. If you have minors that you're caring for or occasionally have cared for, you might be able to set up either a guardianship or a trust in their account. It lets you direct a portion to charity, to worthy causes. And again, the big thing is it lets you account for contingencies. When we sat down with our attorney to do our first will after Emily got married, then the attorney in helping represent us started talking about, well, what happens if they get divorced? I don't want to hear that. But we worked through the ways of sheltering that. So it's important to think about those things. Wills are great because you can always change them. Some people change them on a regular basis. They found what they think was a will that named the housekeeper for Aretha Franklin, who'd never been named before, under the couch cushion after she died, and written in a funny hand. But in Michigan, that's acceptable. In Indiana, it's not. So in Michigan, they found a handwritten note that included the housekeeper in a hand that they're trying to say wasn't Aretha's, but in Michigan, it's included in the probate hearing. So make sure you do it right. But you can change it any time. You can structure things in any way you want to. It's clear. You all know, if you don't, I'll tell you these stories about families where there wasn't a will, there was a fight. My wife's maternal grandmother didn't have a will. She had a farm and she had lots of stuff from way back. She'd put tags on the back of everything of who it went to, dolls and toys and this and that and the other. After she died, someone broke into the house and everything was gone. Now they found out later it was the oldest brother of my mother-in-law, because they found something in an antique store. They were up from North Manchester. They found something in an antique store. One of the neighbors called and said, I swear I saw that baby buggy in this antique store, and found out that Uncle Bob had taken everything and sold it. So this puts my mother-in-law in the position of what? Suing her brother? And what are you going to do? Now, she didn't sue her brother, but they didn't have Thanksgiving dinner again. So why do we want to have our things set up where people wouldn't have Thanksgiving dinner because we didn't do our due diligence? It's very simple and to give to charity. There's easy language that Sonia has that we can share, and it can be contingent. It doesn't have to be, I have to leave them $50,000. I like a percentage. How much of your kind of tithe? Okay, we're going to give 10% of our residual estate to charity, and divide it equally, or half of it goes to this and half of it goes to that. And that amount may go up and down, but you know that will be reflective. In my philanthropy days, we once got a notice that we were in a will, and it was for $250,000. Oh my gosh, it was a huge gift. And so I called the attorneys like, yeah, I don't think you'll probably see that. Their will was so old, it didn't account for the fact that both of them entered long-term care. All the money was basically gone, and actually we didn't get a penny. And now that doesn't matter, and bless them for thinking about us, but that wasn't what they intended to do, right? So if they'd made it 10% of half of what was left, then there probably would have been a little bit of money there. So you can set that up. The other thing about your estate is you can get full tax relief for any gift that you give in your estate. So for some of those, you may wish to make those gifts out of your pre-tax money. So when your 403B comes into your estate, make the gift out of that. And that way you won't have to pay the taxes on that part of your pre-tax money that comes into your estate. And so there are ways of giving that make some sense. The money you've already paid taxes on, give it to the kids. The money you're going to have to pay taxes on would be where I would suggest you might want to make your philanthropy, because you will avoid that taxation, which means you can give more versus it, just going to the government. And I think legacy is important. This is grandson Owen explaining everything to Cece. He has it pretty well all figured out. What do you want to do? Where do you want to have that line in the sand? Is there something you wish to do that you always hoped you could do, but you needed to keep your funds? And if there's money left over, I want to do this or that. And a will is a great way of establishing that legacy. Now, there's something else that goes along with it. This is a wonderful new concept to me anyway, called the ethical will. An ethical will is a document that goes along with your will, puts color on the black and white text, if you will. That may be those things you wish you'd said to those you love, but you never quite got around to it. Or if something happened today, it's something you hoped to talk about, but you hadn't. What your life experience was like, why you did the things that you did. If you divide, like with Aretha Franklin, if you divide your money in a different way because one kid gets an annuity and the other one gets cash, or who gets the farm and who gets money, which is a problem for a lot of people in rural America, then you can explain that in a letter. And it gives a voice, it puts a face on your will. And I think it's a wonderful document to have and to consider when you get to the point when you're writing your own obituary and having those things in order. Write your ethical will. What gave you joy? What was important? Because your kids and grandkids will want to know more about Tipper, Poppy, Gigi, whatever it might be. And this is a way of having those letters preserved. So I like the ethical will while we're doing all these things at once. Now, I will tell you, I strongly recommend you do your will with an attorney. It's really, really important. Yeah, there's stuff you can zoom on, and here's one of them that you can look at. I consider this to be practice. A lot of people say they don't do their will because it's going to cost a lot of money. Well, it's going to cost a little bit of money, But if you're not prepared, it will cost more money. If you walk in and say, well, I'm ready to do your will, you're going to sit down with somebody. They're going to lead you through listing all of your assets. What do you want to have happen? Who are you taking care of? How do I contact them? Well, you can do that online. You can print out your own information, take that to your attorney if you're doing your first will or doing a major revision. And then you won't have as much expense because you've done some of that work. When Steve Million does my taxes every year, I take him a grocery bag full of receipts, but I go through them. And he's like, you can do whatever you want to, but I'm charging you, I think he's about $5,000 an hour now. I'm charging you $5,000 an hour to go through your Burger King receipts and decide which ones you can deduct and which ones you can't. So the same thing with your will. Now, I'm not recommending tomorrow.me. The only thing about tomorrow.me is that they have an attorney from every state who helped put it together. And if you just go to mywill.com, I can't tell you where the attorneys were that put it together. And if they were from New York City or Chicago or San Francisco, state law is different in all those places. So something like tomorrow.me, which you can download, you can even do it on your phone, lets you put these things in categories. Or if you go to aarp.com, or if you go to the Federal Reserve Bank even has one of how you can list all of your assets, have those ready, take those to your attorney. It'll be a whole lot cheaper and easier to change in the future. Send lawyers, guns, and money. So do that. Now, some of you have heard about a revocable living trust. A simple will is good and accounts for most of us. A revocable living trust is more specific. It's more private. If you're covering some people out there that you don't want anybody to know about that you've given them money, then you can do that. A will becomes a public document when it's actually enacted, and you can actually go and look at them. But if you want to have that restriction, if you have more complications to take care of, spouses and children, other people, what the trust does is roll everything into a trust when the time comes. You manage it while you're alive. When you pass, the disposition of those assets takes its toll. In some cases, there are spousal couples, and it's not necessarily guys versus gals. There are some spousal couples where one doesn't want to know anything about the finances. You take care of the finances, I'll make the bread. Okay, that's fine, whatever works. And in that case, having a trust makes sense because it's a burden to that other person if the one who did all the finances goes first. I've heard stories, you have too, of spouses who didn't even know where the bank accounts were, didn't know there was an investment fund, didn't know where to find the documents. Well, and if that's a mutually agreeable situation, then having a trust allows things to happen and puts all that information in one place. Now, the nice thing about a trust is that you can have this pour over. The bad thing is for us is you can't put any pre-tax money into a trust. So you can't put your IRA in there because the IRS wants to make sure that it's not a scam, that you avoid taxation by hiding your assets. And so in that case, use a simple beneficiary note on your IRA, on your bank accounts, the things that you can't put in there. And that makes it easy. But that's, if you hear revocable living trust, that's kind of what that's about. Here's a big thing. So we drove out to Albuquerque. We're not flying yet. So we drove out to Albuquerque. I am in the middle of God's lost wasteland in Texas. The sun is going down. We're a little late getting to Albuquerque. And as we're driving, I see this blue glow in the distance on the horizon. Well, I think maybe I've stumbled into Roswell by mistake, and it's Area 51, and I'm going to see some aliens. I get all excited, and no, it's the first exit on the interstate for probably 25 miles. And you see this glow get brighter, and it's a big storage place. It's out in the middle of nowhere, and there's probably 200 storage units behind barbed wire fence and all that. And I think, isn't that funny? You can't go anywhere in Indiana without seeing a storage unit. And what all do we have that's so important we're paying $100 a month to store it? I think I would rent one and live in it, but that's my retirement plan. So what do you do with all this stuff? The big stuff is really important. What do you do with your house? If you don't have heirs, if people who don't have heirs, what do you do with it? How do I dispose of it? How can I best take advantage of these assets that I have? My daughter lives in Albuquerque. I live in Indianapolis. I don't think Emily's going to want to come back to Indianapolis and go through my garage, which is so full of stuff. It's like the Dewey Decimal System to have stuff located. What do I do with it? How do I get rid of the farm? What do I do with my cars? What do I do with the boat? Now they can, if you're going to have kids who are going to fight over things, then you might want to say, my wife's kind of in this situation with two brothers right now, just put everything in the estate, and you want to buy the car, buy it out of the estate, and the money goes into the estate. And then nobody can fight about it, that he got the Corvette and I got the minivan. You have to think about what's going to happen to those people who will be affected by the will and not cause intrafamilial strife because you didn't want to think about who got the Corvette because you were going to drive it forever and St. Peter was going to take the keys when you dropped it off. So what if you had a business? Is there any value in my little business? I don't know, but if Emily would want it, I want to make sure that she would have access to all those records if I went tomorrow and could maybe make that business. Your insurance policies, have you taken care of your beneficiary statements on your insurance policies as things change? You can have beneficiaries, contingent beneficiaries. If something doesn't happen to the first one, you can split that money where it's two different people and a third goes to charity. You can take care of those things in your beneficiary documents. Now, for my sister, what are you going to do with your Longaberger basket collection? But your collectibles, your stuff, my tools. I don't want my tools up in a estate sale. If Matt, my son-in-law, wants them, he should have them. If not, my friend Benny should have them all because I know he likes to do woodworking, and I don't want them to end up in Goodwill. Right? So if you think about those things, you can take care of it. If you have a particular heirloom, maybe that heirloom, you want it to go to charity. Maybe you know that the Historical Society wants it, or it's something that is valuable that senior services could sell and have some money to use for their programming. So it's important to think through this because at the end of the day, this is what they call the residue of your estate. You have your money, you have your beneficiary account kind of accounts, and then you have residue. So let's take care of that residue because you're not going to get the antique pickers to probably come into your house and make $1 million. So think about your stuff because in many cases, stuff is a burden. Now this is Willa. Hi, Willa. Willa's 4 months now, and she's laughing and smiling, and that's great fun. So insurance, I don't have a bone to pick with insurance. I've done my things, which are very different than probably what you're going to do. So I don't want to recommend insurance of one kind or another. I just want you to think about how your needs may change with time. When I was working and Emily was at home, I had all the insurance I could get because I wanted to make sure that the quality of life of my family didn't change if something happened to me as the primary wage earner. Well, now things are different. Emily's grown, she's married, she has a family. So do I need that much insurance? That's a question. Do I want to use that money to provide for education for the grandkids as opposed to it going directly to Emily? That's something to think about. Long-term care, I want to talk about that a little bit more, but Sonia and Anita are the experts more in long-term care than I. The type may matter. There's 27 different kinds of insurance: term insurance, global insurance, universal life insurance, split interest insurance. You'll have to work your way through all of that. I want you to think about having primary beneficiaries, a secondary beneficiary, and contingent beneficiaries so that you know that insurance will be used in the way that you would like to have it used in a stair-step kind of fashion, accounting for those contingencies, right? Long-term care insurance, this is a tough one. I've wrestled through that and I've made my decision. My advice to you is wrestle with it, make a decision, and then go on and don't second guess. What are the odds you'll need at-home or institutional care? Anita, correct me if I'm wrong. The statistic I'll share is that about 80% of us will have some sort of institutionalization before we die. The last thing that I saw said that average time is running somewhere, depending on what part of the country you live in, between 12 and 18 months. So depending on your insurance needs, you have to consider those things. Jane and I's dad was in the nursing home for less than a year, right about a year, but with intestate right of succession, he was able to pass everything over to my mom, the assets in the farm, and was able to go on Medicare pretty much from day one. Now, my mom, on the other hand, ended up with all the assets and did not shelter them for a number of reasons. But so she was in the nursing home for 3.5 years, Jane, is that right?
Yeah.
And all of it went to the government. And, you know, eventually when she was destitute, she went on Medicare. Medicaid, sorry, gosh, I get those backwards. It seems to me, oh, well, okay. Medicaid. And, you know, she kept her window at the nursing home. She didn't even lose her window bed. So nothing changed for her except several $100,000 had gone to the government, perhaps instead of to her great-grandchildren who could have used it for college. So just do your planning and think about it. Long-term care is expensive. When you look at it, you will get sticker shock. The older you get, the bigger the sticker will be. So it's a good thing to think about, or maybe to work with your kids on. Maybe that's a gift you give them at 50 as a long-term insurance policy, depending on your family history and what you think. This longtermcare.acl.gov is a good place to look at to get some more information. Now, the other thing is Indiana has done some pretty progressive stuff here. And if you go to www.longtermcareinsurance.in.gov, you can see information that Indiana's put together, some of the partners that they have, and you can get more information than people in most states can. So it's worth checking out. Again, whether you do it or not is your decision, and my decision is not really relevant to the conversation, but think about it, make a decision, and then don't worry about it. You know, do it or don't. Because the trains are coming, right? Get ready. We don't want to think about it. And you may not be driving the train when it comes. Somebody else will be driving. So how you want to be in the passenger seat is up to you. Okay, here's something that shakes people up. Power of attorney. I think it's important to think about having a power of attorney as you get older, or maybe a couple or three, maybe a primary, secondary, and contingent. A power of attorney is a legal document that lets someone else make decisions and take action for you if you're not able to. So now people get freaked out because they think if you give somebody a power of attorney, they can suddenly take all of your business, they can take all your money. That shouldn't be true because of what's called springing power. Powers of attorney are generally written with what's called a springing power, meaning they spring into effect if you're incapacitated, if you're unable to make a decision. It doesn't just go into effect now. So that should give you some comfort. The other thing is it doesn't have to be universal. You can manage it in any way you want it. They can make healthcare decisions. That's not the best way to do it, but it could be. It could be they can write checks. They can take care of the farm. When my dad was in a nursing home, if he hadn't gotten things worked out, which we were very close to not being able to get things worked out, my mom couldn't have done things on the farm because it was all joint tenancy. So a power of attorney would have given her or someone else the obligation to write checks to handle the farm, to sell the crops, to get gas for the truck. Somebody could just do your tax returns, give somebody else access to a safe deposit box, because safe deposit boxes are hard to get in if you don't have that taken care of. Insurance, retirement, making gifts, those kind of things. You know, if you've been covering your kids' tuition, your grandkids' tuition, and suddenly you're incapacitated, then the tuition doesn't get paid. They don't have the money. They can't go back to school. That could be something you could have a power of attorney do. So I don't see them as a bad thing. And there's something to think about having. In the healthcare arena, most people have, or should have, you should have, a living will. A living will is a way of letting doctors and healthcare workers know how far you want them to go in treatment. It says, do not take extraordinary measures to extend my life, but provide what they call palliative care, which means make me comfortable and let me go. Now, that's a good document and you should have one. Here's kind of the nick with this one is you're asking a doctor who has taken an oath to preserve life at all costs, the Hippocratic Oath, which most of us is different from being a hypocrite, which most of us are. The Hippocratic Oath says, I will preserve life at all costs. And you're giving them a document saying, yeah, but cut it off when you feel it. Don't take anything extraordinary. You're putting a doctor in a very odd position of, I promise to protect life. And you're saying, but don't protect it past a point. And you decide what extraordinary is. So as hospitals have gotten bigger, I don't know if you've noticed, there's one particular, Hendricks County Hospital, I'll call them out. They have all these ads on TV, and there's 2 or 3 done by nurses and a couple done by the attorney. Now, So how many attorneys do hospitals have versus nurses? I don't know, but I think they have several. And as people litigate for services and things, it may be harder and harder for a doctor to say enough, because you know cases, and you've read about Karen Ann Quinlan and others in our history who were in comas for years and came back. So if that doesn't sound like something that's good enough for you, then there's what's called durable healthcare power of attorney. It's a document. It's a legal document that, especially if you don't have a spouse, or you should have this as a contingency if God forbid, we travel together, right, as couples, and we're in a car wreck and one goes and one doesn't. You don't have the person you thought would be your healthcare representative. Your spouse isn't there. So having that durable healthcare power of attorney as a contingent is probably a good idea. It allows them to make healthcare decisions for you, including if pulling the plug when the time comes. So a lot of people have both, and I think it's not a bad idea. If you have them, keep them together, and you have to keep them where somebody can get to them. This is a conundrum for all of us. Where do you put all these documents that people should get to? You can't put them in your safe deposit box because nobody can get to them. You can put them under the mattress, but nobody knows to check there. If you have a relationship, and I think it's worth a few bucks for all of us that are retired to have a relationship. If you have a relationship you can establish with a bank, and luckily in some small towns, and my wife and I go to a smaller bank for this particular reason, they know us and we trust them versus the mega bank or the internet bank that my daughter goes to. You can have those documents there. If you have an attorney, they can have the documents. I know of one woman who lives by herself, has no children, and she has all of her documents in a recipe box on the counter and has a note on the front that says, "To first responders, all my documents are in here." And that's not a bad thing. You can get the risk things, right? But where you keep your documents is an important thing to consider. When my wife and I went to Africa, we left our documents with Jane and my daughter and found out that they read them all. She sends me notes saying, "Well, that was really, how come you did your will this way?" And I'm like, well, whatever. But, that was okay because that's what we decided to do. But having durable healthcare POA is a good thing to have. Now, there's also advanced directives. And you can go, and Sonia will have this. It's an in.gov. This is Indiana State Department of Health. And if you go to Indiana State Department of Health and search for advanced directives, you'll get these documents and they are legal documents in the state of Indiana that all you have to do is copy them, fill in the blanks, and print them for things like, if you have a condition, a lot of people know what their treatment is and maybe know what's going to happen. And if you're getting Alzheimer's, if you have Lou Gehrig's disease, if you have multiple sclerosis, all these terrible cancer, then you can have a physician's order for scope of treatment, which is specific to that particular affliction. You can have a mental health order, which I've encouraged my sister to get, but she hasn't done it yet. But she's still working on it. And a do not resuscitate order. The interesting thing about the directions you give to a physician, they don't apply to first responders. And there is a separate do not resuscitate order for first responders. So my dad always said, "I'll move off the farm when they take me out of here feet first." Well, they took Dad out about 4 times feet first, and he never had a do not resuscitate order. And that was fine in his particular situation. But if it had been something much more life-threatening, they would have resuscitated until he got to the hospital, and the doctor could have then reviewed the scope of treatment order, the living will, or the durable healthcare power of attorney. So it's a good thing to look at. There's all kinds of stuff. So you can look at these are all the things that are on the Indiana website, including hospital do not resuscitates, living wills, all kinds of good stuff here for you as a consumer. And again, Sonia will have these links here. You also may, consent to autopsy is a form where sometimes you may want to and your kids may not want to. If you want to have a Uniform Anatomical Gift Act, that again may put your children in an odd situation. I'll tell you, I was going to save this for later. Yeah, I'll say, but I have a friend who has 4 siblings. They all grew up Catholic. One of them has remained Catholic. The other 4 siblings have gone from Methodist to agnostic to Buddhist. And they said, "I can promise you that if we were all together and something happened, that we would all have a great way of dealing with it, but they would be nothing like the others. So if you have children that have different views, then perhaps these are ways of making sure that your views are handled in the way you want them, or you don't have your kids squabbling over them. I think we should do this. Well, mom would have wanted that, but I think we should do that. So take care of it that way, be done with it. HIPAA is a big thing for people in that we can't share information like we used to. They will share them with spouses. Spouses get information. Other people may not be able to get information. It depends a little bit on the hospital. The bigger the hospital, the less likely they are to share. Sometimes you can, sometimes you won't, but you can fill out a form, and there's a link here at hhs.gov that you can ask for access, to people's records, even if you aren't a direct, if you're not a spouse. And you can request it. The hospitals also have this form if you're in that situation. So if you've been caring for the lady next door for the last 10 years and she has nobody else, you can ask for the information on her when she gets into the hospital. It's up to the hospital to give it or not, but they have some protection then from liability. So something you may want to think about if you're caring for others. I think you got to pre-plan your will, prepay for it if you can. I can actually tell you about a friend of mine who they had a fist fight. This is God's truth. Fist fight that they had to call the police in the funeral parlor during the funeral because somebody was selected to be a pallbearer and somebody else wasn't. Always did like you best. You always didn't want me. And I guess it escalated. And I knew the person at the funeral home. I called him and just said, okay, I do these some kind of talks. Does this happen a lot? And he goes, you can't imagine how often there are outbreaks and people are sad and there's some raw energy in the room. And next thing you know, somebody's bopped somebody on the head and off it goes. So get it taken care of. If you want to be buried or cremated or embalmed or not embalmed or a fancy thing or not a fancy thing, that's important. If you want a particular mortuary, there's a couple in town. Where do you want to go? Mention it. Open or closed casket, if you have a strong feeling about that. Where to be buried, stored, or scattered, because things change over time. When my dad preceded my mom in death, when we went to the little cemetery over in Brownsburg, where my dad had bought 6 plots in 1940s for his parents, his sister and her husband, my dad and mom. Well, we go over and we're looking, and of course, all these cemeteries have been taken over by the township because they all went bankrupt. So this guy comes from the township and he calls over, literally, Digger, I swear, Digger, who has an excavator and a big cigar, and he comes over and and he's looking at the place and says to my mom, who, my dad's just been gone a couple of days, nope, not room there, ma'am, can't bury both side by side. And my mom's like, what? And she'd been doing such a good job, and she broke down. Because back in the day, they didn't bury people in the containers, and so they buried them closer together. And now that they've started, there's not enough room. And my mom's like, well, what am I going to do? And there's all this empty space, and they don't know who owns it, so they can't sell us an extra site. And what are we going to do? And so Digger says, well, ma'am, we got an answer. We'll just do it California style. I'm like, and my mom's like, what? California style? Goes, yep, we just bury him a little deeper and put you right on top. It'll work out just fine. Well, I guess that'll be okay. And, we joked about it, which I won't go into the joke, but we joked about it and everything was okay. But at a time like that, we're thinking about these things. It could have been really, really bad for my mom. So think about those things. Designate your pallbearers. How do you want to go to the cemetery? I can promise you that my mom did everything, had it all written out. It was wonderful. What flowers she wanted, what songs, what psalms. I wouldn't have picked my mom a lavender casket. I just wouldn't have. Jane was going to get her the Boilermaker Pete casket for sure. But so we knew what she wanted. When my mother-in-law passed away, the thing that stuck in my father-in-law's mind so much was what kind of marker to have. It shouldn't be extravagant, but it should be. I ended up making a cardboard model of it to show him, to give him some peace in this, because that was what stuck with him. So think about those things and get it done. Get it done. Write your own obituary next week. And if you don't like it, then do something to make it better. Do some more volunteer work. Do something special. so that you know what you're going to say about yourself. Just get it done. You notice I have these little water breaks. That's what the music's for. I have to have my water breaks. Okay, I'm sorry. That's, that was heavy stuff. I don't like thinking about it. You don't like thinking about it. That's okay. So now for most of us, have already dealt with this, but I want to talk about the good stuff. Social Security and Medicare. Yay, this is good. So, I'm on the roll. I've got it. My wife is on the roll. She's got it. And it's worked out pretty well. So for those of you younger, I encourage you to keep working. I encourage you to work at good jobs to make lots of money to pay into Social Security so that us old folks are taken care of forever. Now, the big problem is this was the 5 years my wife and I were going to travel. We set up 5 years after we retired. We had our bucket list, which you should all have as well. We had it on the refrigerator. She had hers, I had mine. We would cross-reference. And we got one trip in. Our number one for both of us was going on safari in Africa, which we got to do. And then the world shut down. And now I'm saving money. And I don't want to save this money. I'm supposed to be spending it. And I want to spend it because I have Social Security now. So for those that don't have, and even for some of us that do, you might agree, Social Security is complicated. Because it accounts for all kinds of things: survivors, those that have been handicapped, those that have been hurt, children who have had parents who have passed away. There's lots to Social Security. My advice is, if you're getting ready to get Social Security, so if you have Social Security or if you don't, you've gone into www.ssa.gov and set up your My Social Security account, right? Because, well, why would I do it? I get Social Security because you can be hacked. There are imposters out there, and especially for people who haven't retired. I don't care what age you are, go to ssa.gov and set up your My Social Security account because people can hack your accounts. I had it happen. A friend of mine had it happen. Somebody was trying to get his benefits. So the real vulnerable time is the time when you might be eligible before you take it, but there's still vulnerability on both sides. Plus, they send you nice information about Social Security, and first of all, the other thing is if you want to go check on your account, don't just type in Social Security, because you'll get something that looks very much like ssa.gov, but it's not. You can try it if you want. And if you get into that account, first thing they'll ask for is your Social Security number to log into your account, and then somebody else has your Social Security number. So be careful, ssa.gov, make sure you're talking with them. They should not be contacting you. So for all of us that get calls, my new thing is now is that somebody's charging stuff on my Amazon account. No, they're not. I can check with one click, but they get people confused and scared. So be very careful because predatory people are out there with your Social Security. Medicare and Medicaid, I don't know what to tell you. It is the most complicated thing I've ever looked at in my life. Between my wife and myself, we have 4 college degrees. And I can't figure it out. You've got some wonderful resources, in Lebanon. You've got them with BCSSI. John Cowan does some seminars for people that are helpful. But I mean, man, it is the most complicated thing in the world. And after we both signed up, then we got scared that we'd done the wrong thing. And luckily, we had somebody we could go and talk to, and he talked us through it. But it's complicated. Sign up when you have to, get help. It's out there and it's mostly all free. So that's all I'm going to say about that. So that's really what I have. It's time now to get busy. If you have all these things, I hope you'll go out. I hope you will stay in and celebrate. Have a sparkly grape juice and celebrate because you've done a lot of what you should do and mostly what people haven't done in America. If you haven't, well, then get busy. Pick off some of these things that you need to do. Some people, like my daughter and son-in-law, on Saturday, we're watching both kids because they do a family financial day, and they sit down at least twice a year, and they look at their retirement, their bills, their plans for the kids. Do they have all these documents in place? And we're going to watch the kids so they can do that. And they want most of the day. Now, some of the other ones, we like to do it maybe one at a time because my wife and I get overwhelmed. So let's do the insurance thing. Let's make sure we got our wills done. And we check them off on our list. So whichever way you are in your planning, you should get to where you have these things checked off of your list. Most of them, when you've checked them off, you're kind of done with them. Some of them you will continue to review, like your will, perhaps your distribution designation. What happens if your investments did really, really well and now you have more money than you thought you would have? Can you be more generous to charity? Do you want to do something special with your children or grandchildren? How do you want to handle that? And that's all part of this thinking. It's not just about what you're doing when you're dying. It should be about how you wish to live. One of the things that you'll hear from financial planners, and I'm not saying it's bad, is that we may outlive our money, right? And isn't that what we're all worried about? Is we're going to outlive our money. Then what are you going to do? We're going to be eating cat food and living in an underpass. And I already got the best underpass staked out. I won't tell you where it is, but I'm starting to put cardboard boxes there just in case. But the other option that you may find out is that assumes that your expenses are going to go up like this over time. I'm hoping that my expenses go up and then may go down, because I'm in that stage of life right now where I want to do things I want to do. So maybe I will spend more money now. And when I get to a point where I can't or don't wish to travel and I'm staying at home, then my expenses may go down. Then they may go up at the very end, depending on how I've taken care of my health care. So it's not as easy as thinking that you're going to have this linear need for more and more money. Some things may go up, some things may go down. I want to get rid of the big house. When we downsize, our expenses should go down. I don't need the big house, right? But then if I buy that really cool new Corvette, well, then my expenses may go up. But if I want to buy a Corvette, I'll go buy a Corvette. And if I can't pay it off, then I'll park it out in front of the nursing home and the nurses can drive it, from day to day. But think about how you want to live. Think about what you want to do. And I think the other thing I've learned from people who have retired before me is they find out that they become it's hard to spend money, right? And so they become so constricted, they don't do anything. And then they sit back and go, boy, I wish we had, because now I've got more money. So if you balance things out and think about your strategy a little bit more, then maybe you'll get to that point where you can do those things. Living a life without regret is the way. This is an old Tibetan saying that somehow Sylvia Bornstein was able to steal, but life is painful. Suffering is what's optional. So bad things are going to happen. If you're prepared for them, maybe we don't suffer as much. And I think that's the key point. And I think you can rest easier when your affairs are in order. That's really all I've got. My advice to you is seek more information. That second piece of advice, if you want to go out and start looking at a lot of things on the internet, set yourself up a separate email account. Go to Google, go to whoever, Yahoo, and set up a separate account, because if you start looking on the internet, if you're on Facebook, Fisher Investments is on there every day. What to do if you have $500,000 in retirement? Well, you're going to get spammed from everybody. So my advice is set up a separate email account, and that's where all that junk goes. And then you can see where they sell your name. But I think you should go look at all that stuff. Look at everything. It beats watching TV on the internet, right? Ask Sonia, ask Anita. They have more information. You can ask me confidentially if you want. Again, I won't give you tax or legal advice, but if there's a question that you really have, feel happy to give me a call, and I'll be there.
Will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 64?
The good thing is the answer is yes. Yes, they will. I'm a little worried about 84, but we'll see about that when it comes. So that's it for me. I hope it's been some help. Sonia, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Perry, for taking the time to speak with us today. And I know that Perry has a couple of more segments he's working on, and I think the next one you have finalized. So we'll probably be hosting something either by Zoom, or maybe we can finally host something in person, which we're starting to do here at the agency to bring back all of our programming. So anyway, thank you so much, Perry. You're a wealth of information. We appreciate it. Sorry about those crazy hackers. I reported them, but this is my first experience to host a Zoom call. So when those people came on, I was like, what the heck?
I've never seen that before.
That was crazy. So luckily I, as Perry knows, he's helped me the last couple of days learn how to do this. And so I don't know, they didn't come back. So that was good. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I hope everybody has a great day, and I hope to see you all soon.
Thanks,
everybody.
Bye. Thanks, Perry.
Bye. Thank
Bye,
you.
everybody. Bye, Russ. Bye, staff. Bye, Roger.
Bye, Jane.
Yeah. Bye, Jane. Bye, Russ.
Bye.